modernization plan within this funding profile to ensure the long-term capability and capacity for the Air Defense Commander platforms. Approximately $3.5 billion would have been required in the 2017 to 21 years to continue cruiser modernization per congressional direction. We were unable to fund this approach while our top line was decreasing. Nonetheless, we are committed to retaining these ships to perform the Air Defense Commander mission into the 2040s, and the Navy's submission provides a path to do so while respecting previously approved global force management decisions for these ships. In major aviation programs under the subcommittee's purview, the Navy's new maritime patrol aircraft, the P-8A Poseidon, is demonstrating its game-changing abilities today on deployment. Production continues smoothly, and we complete procurement of the 109 aircraft by 2019. We continue to field the Navy's E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, replacing legacy early warning aircraft with this new capability that will provide air defense far beyond that available to today's Navy. And meanwhile, the Navy's high-endurance unmanned maritime surveillance aircraft, the Triton, is continuing integration activities and flight testing at Pax River. In summary, the Department's 2017 budget request has balanced the resources provided by the Bipartisan Budget Act with our requirement to provide the capability, the capacity, and readiness necessary to uphold national policies, to protect our nation, and assure our allies. We look for your continued strong support for this budget request, as you have shown in this year's 2016 budget. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Secretary, thank you so much for those remarks. And I want to reiterate what the Secretary said. We also have with us today Vice Admiral Joe Malloy, who's the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Integration of Capabilities and Resources. Admiral, thank you for your service to our country, but thank you for always being willing to testify before us. And also Lieutenant General Robert Walsh, who's the Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. General, we appreciate you being here. To all three of you, as Mr. Courtney and I told you beforehand, we would each consider it a privilege to call anyone or all three of you our friends, and we appreciate the service you've done for our country. We do have a series of questions we have to ask, so please don't feel that those questions are in any way at you as much as they are to this budget and making sure we understand. This is probably one of the most bipartisan committees in Congress. It's probably one of the most bipartisan subcommittees. The range of expertise we have, each of our members are going to be able to ask you some very good questions on their subject matter. But I want to kind of begin with an overview. I normally defer mine to the end, but I want us to start off, and I told you each this question a few minutes ago so you'd have time to think about it. Tell us, if you would, is this budget a budget whereby you come before us and say, this is the absolute best we believe we can do with the dollars that are given to us, or is this the budget that you have analyzed and looked at and said, this is the budget we need to defend and protect the United States of America? And either one, this is a tag team match, so you can have it. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. We just want to get the answers, so whoever wants to handle that, we'll let you do it.
I'll start. First, it absolutely is the best we can do for the dollars that we have. I mean, that's just fundamental. The real question that you're asking, though, is whether this is sufficient. And that's obviously a tough question to answer. I would just go back historically and start with the Defense Strategic Guidance that we described, goes back to 2012 timeframe, and that since then our budget has dropped by $30 billion. So back in the 2012 timeframe, I think we laid out a strategic guidance that informed our investments, what we would need near-term, long-term, current readiness, future readiness to provide for the security of the nation. When you inside of the Department of the Navy, when you pull $30 billion out of that, you have to be extraordinarily judicious to make those moves and not impair the security of the nation. So each year we've had to come back and reduce what our projection would be for defense of the nation and do that in the best risk-balanced way we can. So it is you're looking at a smaller budget and therefore reductions across every account, operations, maintenance.
So I don't want to cut you off because I told you at the end you can have all the time you want, but I just want to make this to get a clarity for us. When you guys are coming here, you're basing this budget primarily on the dollars that you have been allocated as opposed to an assessment that says this is what we need overall to defend and protect the United States of America. Is that a fair statement? Admiral, you look anxious to get
Yes,
to
sir.
that.
I would say that is a fair statement of looking at the dollars we have, especially in light of the 17 Bipartisan Budget Act that reduced 17, and despite getting money in 21 for the Ohio, to finish the incremental cost of Ohio replacement, we are constrained. I'll also tell you is it takes time to analyze. We are looking at the world ahead, and one of the items we'll talk later is the force structure assessment, I'm sure, is that we're going to start a new one, and the 308 Navy is based upon a force structure that was set back in 2012 and amended in 14. At that point, there was a man named Putin who wasn't quite so active in the world. The Chinese hadn't grown as big, and all these 5 threats. So we're going to take a hard look at it. That I will tell you is that we have done the best we can what we have, but the projections will tell you is the threats to the United States of America are growing, and it's been mirrored by myself talking to Admiral Haney and Admiral Harris in the last couple of days. I think they'll tell you the same thing from the combatant commander viewpoint.
And they've been telling us that, and as I said, and I preface it, and I'll continue to say it because it's just true, you guys are the good guys. You guys are wonderful guys. Yeah, but we just need to know what we're looking at with these dollars. And the reality, Mr. Secretary, as we looked at that strategic guidance in 2012, the world's gotten a whole lot more threatening, I guess is the best way we can say, since 2012, and yet our numbers have gone down. We looked at the fact Admiral Harris testified that we can only meet 62% of his needs for submarines right now. But in addition to that, we all know in 2007 the Navy could meet 90% of the verified or validated requirements of our combatant commanders around the globe. This year, my understanding is we'll be below 45%, give or take. That means we've cut it in half. Are either of those two numbers acceptable numbers?
Clearly not to the combatant commanders.
But clearly not to the United States.
Therefore, they set the requirements. Therefore, the answer you're going to get here is clearly not.
Good. And the second thing is, and again, you guys are good guys, so this is not directed at you. You're doing the best with what you've got. We just need to know what we need. When you talk about 308 ships, Mr. Secretary, by 2021, with the dollars that we currently have allocated and based on the dollars we've had, can we get to 308 ships? With those dollars, are we going to need more dollars to be able to get there?
Yes, sir. Here's the fact. We are going to get to 308 ships independent of the 2017 budget. 2017 and beyond determines what size Navy we will have after 2021, because that's how long it takes to build a ship. So the ships that will be delivered by 2021 have been authorized and appropriated in years prior to this budget year. What we are setting in 2017 and beyond is the course for the size of the Navy past 2021.
And as you heard, and we talked about before this hearing, Eric Labs and his testimony from the Congressional Budget Office, and I don't think you'd refute that if we continue with the degree of spending we've had for shipbuilding and ship construction on an average over the last 30 years, instead of increasing the number of ships, will ultimately be down to 237 ships. Is that a fair assessment that he made, or is that inaccurate?
Let me put it in context. As we go forward, starting in 2021, you'll see a significant increase in our funding required to support a shipbuilding program, due in large part to the Ohio replacement. And I think Dr. Labs' assessment and the Navy's long-range shipbuilding plan both say the same thing. If we constrain our shipbuilding account to historic levels, then due to the cost associated with building the Ohio replacement, and we are going to build it, other shipbuilding production lines are going to have to be cut significantly, and that will drive a significant reduction in the size of our Navy.
Could his projection of 237, 238 ships be in the ballpark of what the Navy would assess it to be if we continue on course?
I would say it's very close. You have to make some assessment in terms of which ships would be built and not, but I would tell you that my number is probably in the 240 to 250 range.
So we have a huge delta that we have to make up somewhere. Does the Navy have any idea where that delta would be made up today if we were to try to say, how do we get those dollars?
Sir, it comes back to be the balance. I would not constrain it to shipbuilding, but then you have to pressurize every other aspect of the Navy. And I will tell you is we would not be able to totally within the Navy come up with all that money. So it goes back again to my discussions with the Secretary of Defense's staff, is that shipbuilding with that level of shipbuilding necessary and from 2021 on through 2035 to do a high replacement and all the other aspects we need for the combatant commanders is going to require very likely an effort from the Department of Defense and very likely from the whole country to raise. Because historically, when we built the Trident-class submarine, the Navy and the Department of Defense budget went up to a certain extent to cover strategic forces. We saw the first inclination of that this year in 21. You'll see is that the first increment of that budget was funded with an increase in the Navy budget from OMB. We need more of that from OMB and from Congress to be able to build a strategic force, build the Navy, operate the Navy, and then be part of the joint force, sir.
Admiral, let me ask you this. Obviously, part of what we have to do in looking at our force structure is what we project some of our peer competitors to have in their force structure. Let's go out to, let's say, 2025. The number of submarines we'd be looking at then as a Navy, if we stay on the current projections we have, compared to the number of submarines that China would have, let's say, in 2025. Do we have any kind of estimate of the disparity between those two numbers?
Well, I mean, right now we know they're somewhere around 70. We can come back with a classified brief on the numbers, but our numbers will be dropping to below 48 by 2025 and going to a nadir of 41. And then
by 2025, wouldn't we be at 41?
No, by 2025, we'll be at 48
Eight.
submarines.
About
Going down.
2021, we'll be at 41.
In
Oh,
2025,
2029, we'll be at 40.
2029 will be at 41, yes, sir.
And do we have any unclassified projection of where they'll be at that time?
At least 70, sir.
Okay.
At least 70 in their building. So, I mean, without a doubt. Now, you get back into a whole quality versus quantity issue, but at the same time, the Russians are also building. We talked about the other country there. As they're continuing to build, and they build much higher-end submarines. To their numbers, I'm not ready to forecast what they'd have, but they are certainly building as well. So the threats on the undersea environment continue to go up with the number of submarines being built by everyone else. And right now, and that comes back to this whole point about shipbuilding that I think we'll start with and end on this day, is that the number of submarines we have was put in motion a long time ago with not building and then not going to 2 a year. That we don't want to take that a case with DDGs or other ships is we need to continue to build or we'll have a fall off in all our classes of ships that we don't on a regular basis. Once again, to support the Marines, we have to build amphibs on a regular basis, and that's that competition Mr. Stackley talked about. Shipbuilding has to be able to go up, and is it coming out of the rest of the Navy, or is it coming out of DOD, or is it coming as a conscious effort as this country to say shipbuilding's important enough? But the submarine program is asymptomatic or directly related to decisions made 10 to 15 years ago.
Oh, good. And well, let's take spin off from there then to the General, because General, we don't want you to not play a role in this. The LPD 28, was that crucial to the Marine Corps to get that LPD 28?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Forbes, and also Ranking Member Courtney, and all of you for having us here and all you do for the nation and for the Marine Corps. I was in a unique position last year because I was up on the CNO staff, on the OPNAV staff, working the LXR program and working the LPD 28, trying to bridge that gap from LSD to the LXR. So I think the LPD 28 will provide us that capability now that we've made that decision to the LXR to be that derivative of the LPD 17, to use that common hull form, that the LPD 28 certainly provides us additional amphib capability and a great ship that we needed because of the amphib numbers. As you know, we're at 30 amphib ships right now, far below the requirement that we have. So the committee helping us to add that 12th LPD is certainly going to be well appreciated out in the operating forces.
And General, can you tell me what the Marine Corps requirement currently is?
Well, our requirement has always been 38 amphib ships.
And how many do you have today?
And today, as we speak, we have 30.
Was the LPD a luxury or was it a necessity for the Marine Corps?
Well, to get up to the requirement that we need, I think it certainly is one of those things that requires. So going back to your sufficiency question, we're basing our numbers, really on what the department can afford.
And I understand, and again, you guys are good guys. We appreciate that. What we're trying to find out is whether the budget's driving what we're doing or whether our strategy's driving what we're doing. And the main thing I'm saying is you got a 38 requirement.
Right.
Was that LPD a luxury or was it a necessity for the Marine Corps?
No, I would say it was a necessity to get us. So I think if I could put it into perspective, is we talked about combatant commander demand. Commander demand is very high, but how to put that in perspective from our perspective would be, is it's been a long time since we've really ever had any ships in the Mediterranean. We used to have ARGMUs in the Mediterranean. We've been focused pretty much on the Central Command AOR for a long time. But as you look around in the AFRICOM AOR and certainly the EUCOM AOR, what's going on with in Ukraine, Crimea, what you see taking place in North Africa with ISIL spreading, the disorganization there in Libya. There's no question about it that the presence that we would like to have would be on amphibious warships in the Mediterranean. Right now, as you're well aware, we've got our Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force, Crisis Response Africa, that is bed down in Morone, Spain. Works between Morone, Spain, Sigonella, Sicily, and Suda Crete, back and forth between those places. We'd much prefer to be on amphibious warship to be able to provide that capability.
Mr. Secretary, you just heard generals say that the LPD-28 was a necessity to the Marine Corps, but it wasn't included in the Navy's budget when you submitted it to us last year. Why wasn't it included? Or do you disagree with the general that it was a necessity?
No, we did include it in last year's budget. The 2016 budget included the funding required for the LPD, the balance of funding required for the LPD-28. We've got the material on order. We expect to have that ship on contract at the end of this year. The program of record that preceded the LPD-28, General Walsh is correct that 38 is the number of amphibs required to provide full, true Marine Expeditionary Brigade lift for major combat operations. That's 38 ships. The CNO and the Commandant, for 6 years now, have agreed that 34 would be the objective number of amphibs for the force, which takes on some risk. Of that 34, the mix of ships would be, at that time, was decided to be 11 large deck amphibs, 11 LPD-17 class ships, and 12 LSD-4149 class. By adding the LPD-28, one, that greatly relieves the risk associated with 34 versus 38 amphibs. Two, it does provide a bridge for the industrial base between the end of construction of the LPD-17 and the LXR, and most importantly was the Department of the Navy's decision that we would make LXR and we would design and build LXR as a modification to the LPD-17 hull form for all the right reasons. And so now that LPD-28 helps to provide the bridge for the industrial base, for the design base, for the vendor base, as well as alleviating some of the lift considerations. So now we'll have 12 LPD-17s, the 11 big deck amphibs, and then the LXR program, getting us up to about a 34 amphib force for the foreseeable future.
Two last questions for me, then we'll go to Mr. Courtney. The proposal you have is to take out a carrier air wing. What's the current statutory requirement for the number of carrier air wings that we are supposed to have?
Sir, the current statutory requirement is to have 10 air wings.
And if we took the one out, would we be down to at that point in time?
Yes, sir, we'll be down to 9, and we intend to submit a legislative proposal requesting relief from that.
Without that legislative proposal passing, are you able to take that carrier air wing out?
No, sir, it would be blocked by congressional action.
Okay, and do you not have a proposal to begin doing that by October 1st?
The proposal was to put that in motion, but none of the squadrons would actually be deactivated at that time. We funded the air wing and the squadrons for what's called half year, so the people in the operations are funded for half the year with the anticipation we would have some time to be able to coordinate that.
So the Navy is in a position to begin to put something in motion that statutorily they're prohibited from doing?
Yes, sir, we have to, we are, that's why we send over the legislative proposal, and the law was assumed was that we would be able to come over and make that case, that we think that with the current laydown of 11 nuclear aircraft carriers and their maintenance structure and the way they cycle through life, that 9 air wings actually lines up appropriately, be it such that I don't have air wings that don't have a carrier to go to, and we've had some air wings that spent 4 years.
How many carriers are we required to have statutorily?
Required to have 11, and we have 10 currently on a waiver, and we're building the forward, sir.
Okay. And if you have 10 carriers that are operational and one that is being refueled, how many air wings would you need to supply those?
Normally in the previous part of the Navy, that would be required to have one less, would be 10. But as you look at the Nimitz class aircraft carrier and the maintenance structure they go through, which is one of them is always in a 4-year refueling overhaul, one is always in a 16-month docking maintenance availability, and 2 are in 6-month availabilities. As you cycle through right now, as we laid out the carrier plan through 2025, at no time does an aircraft carrier that would be operational not have an air wing that would be part of their full, we call the optimized fleet response plan. This actually lines up that in that plan, there are actually 3 air wings that will spend 11 to 22 months doing basically maintenance, training, and planning without an aircraft carrier to be attached to, given I only have 9 for the 11 aircraft
So your
carriers.
testimony is then that you need to reduce the air wing, not because of budgetary restraints, but because you just don't need that carrier air wing.
It's a combination of primarily, it aided me as a cost reduction there, but it was really lined up. We looked at this for a couple years when I was doing the transition of the squadrons, the flexibility of having an air wing offline long enough to change the airplanes from the prowlers to the growlers, the helicopters to the new design, and the Hornet ENFs. But at this point in time, given the 11 or 10 and going to 11 aircraft carrier nuclear maintenance strategy and the way air wings deploy is they don't go off like the Air Force AAF, 9 air wings actually lines up as the right business case, sir.
Secretary, last question from mine is Navy came over a few years ago and they wanted to do away with some of our cruisers. Then they came back to us and said that, oh, we rethought that. We really just want to modernize them. We don't want to kill them. And now they're coming back and want to lay them up again. We have a requirement for 88 high-end surface combatants. How do you get to that 88 without those cruisers? And secondly, where is the money to bring those cruisers back? Is there any money proposed to do that, or is this just another way of saying we're going to euthanize these cruisers?
Yes, let me start with the number of large surface combatants. In fact, with our build rate today, we do have a period of time where we not just meet our large surface combatant requirement, which is cruisers plus destroyers, but we do have excess. We have additional capacity, and so we actually get up to a number of about 100 surface combatants in the mid-2020s. So that's not where our area of risk is. Our area of risk in terms of the air defense commander, that with the capability that the cruisers provide, is when they start coming, they start decommissioning as early as 2020. So in 2020, we start to decommission the first 11 cruisers. And the discussion that we're having today and the issue that we've been wrestling with the last several years is the modernization program for the last 11 cruisers. So we got 4 of them off and going, and by congressional legislation, we'll be allowed to induct 2 more in the 2017 budget. The proposal that we have coming across in the budget provides some operation and maintenance, some operation in 2017 to allow the cruisers that are not in the modernization program to complete their deployments and their operational commitments. But after completing those, it would then bring those into the modernization program to then be allowed to harvest, frankly, the savings associated with demanning the ships, pulling them out of the operational cycle, and then offset some of the costs for modernization. So we would not be modernizing them all at the same time. We'd be doing that in a phased fashion, starting with the 4 that are already in the modernization program. We would be reactivating them, bring them back in service as the first 11 cruisers retire.
Is this a change from the proposal you had last year?
It's a marginal change,
It's a pretty big margin to me, but Mr. Courtney, recognized for any questions he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. And I want to.
So I'm sorry. I just to correct. When you say the proposals we had, just to be clear, we had a proposal to Congress in the past to bring all the 11 cruisers in the modernization at the same time, and you provide the legislation that what's known as 246.
So what was your what was your first proposal that you had for those cruisers? The very first one that the Navy came over with. Was it to modernize the cruisers?
I think 3 years ago, the proposal cut the funding and proposed to decommission 7 of the cruisers.
So, and then all of a sudden you came back to us, I think fair, and said, no, we really don't want to get rid of them. We've seen the error of our ways. We want to keep them in. We need them. We're going to modernize them. And now you're coming back and saying we're going to put them all up. We just don't have any money to take them back out. Is that a fair statement?
Well, the dollars to put them back in service all beyond the fit-up. So we would be putting them back in service on a one-for-one basis.
But, Mr. Secretary, is this decision being driven by dollars or by strategic concerns?
Well, I would tell you, frankly, first it's by dollars.
That's what we thought. Mr. Courtney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I think, as I mentioned to you beforehand, the testimony we've had just in the last 2 days from 2 of our major combatant commanders, Admiral Harris and General Breedlove, has really underscored the Seapower challenges that are out there and the importance of this subcommittee's portfolio, which is going to go first in this whole process of the four committees. So obviously the testimony here today could not be of more critical nature for our nation. I also want to recognize Tom Crowley, who's here, the Director of Programs for Legislative Affairs, who has been really an incredible asset to this subcommittee over the last 10 years or so. I think this is going to be, if not the final, close to the final appearance here with us. And I just want to thank you for your amazing advice that you gave to all of us, and wish you good luck at NOAA. Now you can save the planet, serving over there. And again, we all appreciate your input and good guidance over the years. Secretary Stackley, in your testimony on page 11, you stated that it's the Navy's intention to contract for up to 10 boats in the Block 5 contract, which, again, we're in Block 4 right now. Block 5 will commence in 2019. That's, a critical time period given the decline in the submarine fleet size that was discussed earlier with Mr. Forbes. And again, I think all of us appreciate the fact that you stated that that's the Navy's intention, is to really not slip from that 2 sub a year build rate that we've scratched and clawed so hard for starting in 2011. But frankly, it's not about us. It's really about what the combatant commanders told us in the last 2 days about the critical need for as many undersea platforms as they could possibly acquire. And so I guess, maybe you could talk for a little bit about how you plan to find, the authorities, the savings, so that we can, again, protect that build rate, which our combatant commanders desperately need.
Yes, sir. First, you start with the requirement. As has been discussed, we have a compelling need for additional attack submarines. Today at 52 boats, requirement of 48. We hit a valley of 41 boats in the 2030s. We start falling below the line in the late 2020s. So that valley exists because of years that we didn't build any submarines and then a long period of building 1 submarine a year. We got up to 2 boats a year starting 2011. Everyone has witnessed the improved performance through learning curve, through economic order quantity, everything that has come together on the Virginia program to drive cost in the right direction. And now those boats are delivering 2 per year, ahead of schedule, under budget, and they're out there performing. They're our leading edge. When the Ohio replacement starts construction, our long-term plan has 1 Virginia a year and 1 Ohio a year in those years. We still continue with 2 boats per year, but one of those is going to be the Ohio replacement. That helps to contribute to the shortfall in submarines, frankly. And the first time we hit that's going to be in 2021. So we'll be at 2 boats per year for a 10-year period, and then we're going to dip back down to 1, come back up to 2, and then we're going to dip back down to 1 as we build Ohio replacements, and we'll be at 1 a year for a good while. That's not good for the nation. So that has been the long-term plan. It is as much about affordability as anything else because of the significant investment that Ohio replacement is going to require. But as we sit here today with the 2017 budget being submitted, and we're looking ahead to 2021, we're looking at that shortfall in the out years, we've got to do something different. We have to find an alternative to try to stave off that shortfall. So last year and the year prior, working with Congress, we've had the discussion about the types of authorities and the way that we would design and build the Ohio replacement to drive affordability into the program and to balance the industrial base. So we're looking at that now. We've got the design technical baseline done. We've got the build plan that we've worked out with industry. We're going into the details. And as we do this, we're trying to identify, can we generate savings in the way we build the Ohio replacement to help to fund and finance that additional submarine in 2021. It's not a part of the program of record. But if we don't work hard today, we'll miss the opportunity entirely. And the most important boat in terms of trying to mitigate the impact associated with that shortfall is the 2021 boat, that 2nd Virginia in that year. If we miss that opportunity, we will not be able to regain that later. So we're working today. It's not a part of the program of record. That's why it says up to. But we are working today, and we hope and expect that you'll work with us to determine how can we keep 2 Virginias per year proceeding within all the fiscal constraints and within the limitations of the industrial base to address this compelling requirement for the nation.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, this subcommittee is going to be all in as far as trying to achieve that goal. In fact, I would say we were maybe a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of, you know, the measures that we passed the last couple of years in terms of the Sea-Based Deterrence Fund, which Dr. Labs and his team analyzed at the end of last year and said that with the authorities that we incorporated into that fund, you know, multi-year authorities, economic order, quantity, savings, you know, buying across, you know, various ship programs that he calculated $10 billion in savings. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about, you know, what you're thinking over, you know, down the street in terms of utilizing that as the mechanism to try and, again, protect these build rates down the road. Because, again, the message came through so loud and clear the last couple of days about the fact that we really can't let that production rate slip.
Yes, sir. So as I described, this past year we have locked down the technical baseline for the Ohio replacement and the build strategy with our industrial base. So this year what we're doing is we're going those next levels of details to identify how are we going to procure the material, what are the material procurement items that we're going to go after first in terms of long lead, what are the advanced construction activities that we want to put in place, not just for affordability, but also to manage risk on the Ohio replacement schedule. And as we do that, we're looking side by side with the Virginia program, and frankly, we're also looking at the carrier program going through these 2 shipyards at the same time. And so we're trying to identify where can we get savings associated with procuring material across multiple programs, but going for these large procurements that we get to leverage the volume in behalf of the government, exercise the advanced construction authorities that you provided. We've already in our budget exhibit, you see where we're laying out an incremental funding profile consistent with the authorities that you provided. We think that the tools that you have put in place, as we work through these details, we'll be putting those tools to work to get those savings that the CBO has highlighted, and we think that's going to contribute greatly to trying to finance this additional submarine in 2021.
Mr. Burns, recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Stackley, 2 years ago, you remember that the Secretary of Defense recommended a reduction of the LCS program from 52 ships to 32 ships, and the Navy went through a several-month period of study to determine what the future was going to be for the LCS program. As a result of that, the decision was to go back up to the 52-ship buy, and the last 20 ships would be the upgraded frigates. And we funded it in the omnibus bill that year and the omnibus bill this past year. So we followed that along with what the Navy and the Department of Defense asked us to. Now we're abruptly going back down to 40. So I'm wondering if a similar analysis was performed in your decision to recommend going from 52 to 40 as you did when we decided to go back up to 52 and the upgrade to the frigate. Did you do a similar study or analysis to get to that?
Sir, Admiral Malloy made reference to a document that we refer to as the Force Structure Assessment. The CNO's document, take a look at what size and shape does our Navy need to be, numbers of ships by types. And the most recent update to the Force Structure Assessment was done in 2014. And in there we outline by type of ships, small surface combatants, which the LCS is small surface combatant, that we require 52 of these ships to perform our missions. The decision a couple of years ago to stop construction of LCS at 32 ships and then move to a more lethal, more survivable ship consistent with a frigate. We would procure 20 of those. That keeps the total number of small surface combatants at 52, 32 LCSs, 20 frigates. We completed that design activity. The frigate is going to be a modification to the LCS, so we still meet our 52 requirement. In this budget cycle, the decision was made. Again, it comes down to the reductions in the budget. Reductions in the budget drove trades in terms of capability, near-term, long-term, and the decision was made not based on force structure assessment. The decision was made to reduce the number of small surface combatants to 40. That would mean a reduction inside the FITIP from 14 down to 7. It drives a down select to the program. And what we have tried to do with that decision is try to stave off the down select until we can get to that frigate design, because that's what we do need for the balance of our small surface combatants.
But your decision was to go to 52, and now we've gone abruptly down to 40. So you've made the decision based upon what analysis, if any analysis, that's similar to what we did 2 years ago to do the 52 buy and to have the last 20 be the frigates.
The Navy's analysis is captured by the force structure assessment, which still requires 52 small surface combatants. The decision to go from 52 to 40 becomes a budget-driven decision and accepts risk with small surface combatants.
So you still need the 52 surface combatants.
That in accordance with our force structure assessment, yes, sir.
So by recommending we go down to 40, you're not meeting your requirement for surface combatants, small surface combatants.
The answer is we're taking risk in small surface combatants. And frankly, the Secretary of Defense, you know, he looked at the total force structure and described large surface combatants. We're going to get up to 100. So in fact, we have more large surface combatants during this period of time. So he decided, well, we'll take risk. We'll use the large surface combatants to offset the small. In the long term, what we have to do is make sure that that decision, in the long term, we don't end up going south in both large and small surface combatants.
And have you done a study about what this is going to do to the industrial base?
We're working with the industrial base right now. Well, the clear statement is with the numbers that we're talking about, we have to go to a down select. So while today we have 2 shipbuilders who have been in this program from day one.
And driven down costs.
And have invested in their facilities, have driven down costs, and are delivering in accordance with contracts and plans. Once you go to this level of construction, you have to down select. There's not enough workload there to sustain 2 shipyards.
But your request for the next year is for 2 ships, and we've been doing 3 ships plus 1 forward funded. So what's going down to 2 ships, even in the interim, going to do to the industrial base? You have 2 shipyards still operating.
2, there will be a cost impact associated with going to 2 versus 3, but it won't break the industrial base. What will break will be the decision to down select. That will drive likely one of those shipyards out of business based on their other workload.
But it was, I'm going to run out of time, but it was your decision, the Navy's decision, that you liked having 2 competing shipyards because that helped drive down your price. Are you concerned it's going to drive your price back up?
Wherever we have competition, we have better outcomes in terms of not just cost, but also in terms of innovation. And so what we would have to do, again, we're formulating the acquisition strategy, but in that down select, we would likely down select for the balance of the program. So we exit the program with competition and not end up in a sole source scenario. But when you do that, you add risk, you add significant risk to the program.
My time's out, but I'll have some further questions to submit to you later in writing.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
And I think the clarification of what Mr. Byrne was asking, it would be an increase of about 20% in cost in FY17, correct? Per boat.
There'd be 2 sources of cost increase. There's going to be cost increase to the ships that you're procuring, but also recognizing that one of those shipyards is going to go out of business. That's going to drive cost to all the ships under construction.
Okay. The gentlelady from Guam is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and gentlemen. Thank you for your testimony here today and for your service. I do applaud the work of our Navy in providing forward deployed capabilities and continuous global force projection, despite significant fiscal constraints. For example, I know I'm not alone in this subcommittee in supporting robust U.S. freedom of navigation operations. Admiral Malloy, yesterday Admiral Harris testified that Chinese intent to militarize the South Pacific region is very clear. Beyond continued FONOPs, and given the restrictions we face not being claimants in the territorial disputes, how can we continue to counter Chinese influence in the South and East China Seas, and what resources, authorities, or funding does the Navy need to do so? And further, how can we leverage partnerships in the region as a multiplier effect to strengthen our posture and reduce costs?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to formally answer an area that the authorities are outside my area as the N8 for the Navy, but I would like to answer your question now and then propose a longer answer once I coordinate with other parts of the Navy staff. From my area, one of the biggest items I think we have to do is continue to maintain that forward presence. We just put our 4th submarine in Guam. We're moving the 2nd submarine tender. We need to have the continued operations of the Pacific Fleet out there. We need to develop those high-end weapons and develop and test them out there, because when we test them, we demonstrate to the world we have the capability to hold Russia, China at risk. So it's building those forces, it's building the weapons, it's building the aircraft necessary to operate and continue to operate with our allies. We have no territorial aspersions in the area. We do fawn ops against all the countries over there because we don't agree with any of their particular claims. We want them all to solve it as a group. So for all the attention we're getting to fawn ops against China, we drive past all of the islands claimed by all the countries out there and remain a ongoing program around the world of wherever there's pressure, because we view it as part of our maritime history of this country as we provide freedom of the seas and ensure it for all countries. And in terms of, so we have to build the ships, we have to build the aircraft, we have to build the weapons, and we have to demonstrate their use, and we have to work with our allies in that area, from smaller navies such as the Philippines to working with our Malaysian allies, and primarily with our clear allies by treaty is also Japan and Korea. So as we work around that area, that's what we have to do, ma'am, is continue to be operating with presence, which requires support from Congress and our efforts to have the ships and weapons to go forward.
Thank you, Admiral. Now, for any of our witnesses, the CSIS recently released another independent assessment on the rebalance to the Asia-Pacific region. Among their recommendations, a few seem pertinent to this hearing. The report calls for a second carrier to be positioned in the Asia-Pacific region, ostensibly in Japan, as well as greater presence from small surface combatants. The report also calls for increased undersea capabilities in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, I'm concerned that this year's budget will challenge the Navy to address these recommendations from the report. What steps is the Navy taking to address the recommendations from the CSIS, and how, broadly speaking, does this year's Navy's budget support the rebalance strategy? I guess, Admiral, that would be a question for you.
Yes, ma'am. As I indicated, the study has been evaluated. We're looking at their options. First off, this forward deployed aircraft carrier is an easy to recommend solution, but tremendously expensive. Even if I was beyond a Budget Control Act Navy, we're talking an investment of if we had permission in places, $2 to $5 billion just to be able to have the ability to have a carrier, air wing, and deploy things. So that is a significant change fundamentally going forward. In terms of the other items, as I said, we're putting 2 extra DDGs in Japan that are the fully, block, what we call baseline 9 ballistic missile and cruise missile defense ships. We're putting 4 LCS in Singapore by 2018. We're continuing to put an extra, the LPD-17 class we talked about earlier. The first increment of that ship is actually going over to replace in the amphibious ready group in Japan. So across the board, all our forces, the submarine force we talked about is the concern is the size. We put a 4th one in Guam so that we have that fantastic location to operate from. We get significant presence and the ability to rapidly be in the waters. You leave Guam and within a couple of days you're in somebody else's waters. That is not lost on the Navy. It is not lost upon other people over there. So once again, forward basing is important to us. We just continue to do that. We need to continue to build the Virginia class and also build the Virginia payload module, such that I get from 12 to 40 strike weapons on every SSN. So every SSN can do all those missions, but bring a much larger firepower and punch on board. Those are all steps we have to do as we look forward to it. It includes, basing building our PH to build 109. Our first squadron will now have airplanes in Whidbey Island by the end of the year, and we'll start being able to do detachments out of Hawaii. Those all are steps the Navy takes to lean forward in the Pacific, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much, Admiral, and I yield back.
Chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee, Mr. Whitman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your service to our nation. Secretary Steckley, I want to build on a comment that you made concerning LPD 28 and LXR. Just returned from PACOM along with Ms. Bordallo. As we talked to PAC fleet commanders, PACOM commanders, one thing was clear. Amphibious ships are in dire need in the Pacific, and I know as well as throughout other areas where our MEBs operate, MUs, and our MAGTAVs. What I want to get from you is this. We're looking at how do we keep things on track, and I think General Neller put it well. This is a program with LXR. We're using the LPD-28 as a prototype, so we're moving things quicker. We're building a ship less expensively, and we're delivering it faster. So all those things very, very necessary. In the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2016, we provided $250 million to move that program to the left from 2020 to 2018. And I appreciate your testimony to say that you're doing long lead time material acquisition as well as advanced design work to move that to 2019. As we look at shipbuilding programs, I think it's critical the spacing in programs and how those programs come into being and how we fund ships. You heard from Mr. Courtney, ORP is extraordinarily important. But we've got to make sure, too, that we have the timing on these programs correctly. That's why I believe it's extraordinarily important to be able to move LXR to the left to begin in 2018. I think that's critical because that makes space to where ORP can come online and we don't have to worry about unbearable cost at any one time. So making space for that with what we know is coming with ORP, I think is critical. My question is this, I think it's necessary to move LXR to the left to start in 2018. What can we do in the FY17 and NDAA deliberations to make that happen, to truly make what was in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2016, and that is moving the start from 2020 to 2018. Give me your perspective on how we can make that happen, because I think the industrial-based capacity is there.
Yes, sir. Let me, the flow is first the decision to use the LPD hull form for the LXR. That was the first key decision here, and that was just a little bit over a year ago. And so with that decision, everything flows from that. The second thing then came down to the LPD 28, using that as a bridge platform. And so we've got the LPD 28 material on order, and that ship will be under construction here in about the 2017 timeframe. Then the third piece is the design itself for the LXR. We have what's called contract design going on right now, which is the level of detail that you need to in order to put the actual ship under contract. But we've got to go from contract design to detail design that the shipbuilders will need to do before they start construction. So today I can't look at you today and say, other than providing additional funding for more material and risk reduction, things of that nature, I can't say today that we will be able to accelerate another year. But what I can say is that we will work with industry and determine can we accelerate that design activity, which is the thing that next needs to be done alongside the material procurement in order to get the construction going a year earlier. I know it's a top priority for industry because of the industrial-based concerns. I think the decision to reuse the LPD 17 hull form greatly reduces the amount of design activity that's going to be required. Now what we need to do is just carefully make sure that we're not rushing into construction before we've completed the design sufficient enough that we don't end up losing what we've got today, which is good cost control, good performance by the shipyards.
Seems like to me, though, that what we're learning on LPD 28, we've made much of that transition, so we should be able to capitalize on the time advantages that we're gaining from that. We're using the same hull form. The onboard ship systems in determining what we're going to have on the LXR, to me, is that linch point. To me, you can still get to a mature design, do long lead time acquisition, as well as accelerate design. I think the industrial base has the capacity to do that. So I'm wondering if you seem to be somewhat hesitant to say that the Navy can actually move it to the left. Is there some impediment to be able to do that? Because it seems like the capacity is in the right places. So what I'm asking is, what do we need to do to make that happen?
Well, let me first. You mentioned the LPD 28. We are using that as a bridge ship, not just for construction, but for design, because it will be an interim between the LPD 17 hull form and the LXR. And we did that for that exact reason. Mm-hmm. But today our schedules don't arrive at a design that's going to be 2 years early. Mm-hmm. So we go ahead and pull the material ahead so we can at least get a year out of there. But I can't look at you today and say we can accelerate that activity by a year. Now we might, a mitigating strategy might be let's go ahead and bet that we can, mm-hmm. and put the mechanics in motion to support that. And then have an exit strategy, if in fact the design is not ready.
Gotcha. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. I think it's very important on this subcommittee that we talk about numbers of ships and capacity and whatnot. But sometimes I get a little frustrated when we seem to focus exclusively on that. My experience in the Marines, if I had a platoon going up against a bunch of Taliban, I wouldn't much care whether there were 40 or 50. I would care a lot about whether they had IEDs, whether or not they had just rifles or automatic weapons, whether they had active cell phone networks so they could provide intelligence on what we were doing, or whether they had no idea where we were maneuvering. So I think it's hard to talk about the number of ships we need when you don't talk about the relative capabilities of those ships, versus our adversaries. And I know that's something you look at in your planning, but I think it's something we also need to talk about here on the committee. Now, I'm new to Congress, but I understand we have statutory requirements for the number of aircraft carriers that we have. We don't seem to have statutory requirements for spending on research and development, or spending on intelligence, or cyber, or meeting the hybrid warfare capabilities of Russia. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You know, if we'd canceled the Manhattan Project during World War II so that we could build a few more aircraft carriers, I don't think it would have been a good decision. Now, this Congress recently passed a science bill. That's really just a thinly veiled attack on climate science, but it prevented funding for NSF projects that are not in the, quote, national interest. Now, this sounds great. We want to fund things that are in the national interest. But if that bill had been passed a long time ago, I don't think that Einstein would have been able to get his funding back at Princeton for the basic research that led to our strategic nuclear capability. So my question really gets to the heart of this debate about capability versus capacity. Do you think that our capability lead over Russia and China is growing or shrinking?
I describe it as we have two curves for since World War II. Our curve in terms of capability has been the steepest curve on the chart. However, in the last, say, 5 years, what we're seeing is China and Russia, their curve, frankly, looks like it's going to cross ours. And in certain areas, it has crossed ours.
So how many times has China attacked us here at home with aircraft carriers or cruisers in the last 20 years? I think we know the answer. How many times has China attacked us here at home with cyber attacks? It's ongoing. So my question is this: what can we do on this committee to help you better balance investing in capacity versus investing in capability? If it's true that these lines are about to cross, and this historically that we have enjoyed for half a century over our biggest allies, or adversaries rather, is going to go away. So what can we do to free you from the parochial political concerns of Congress to make sure that you can make the smartest decisions about where these investments go, not just in capacity, but in the capabilities of our forces?
Sir, I would tell you, in building our budget, there is intense effort to try to get the right balance in terms of capacity and capability. There truly is. And when we deliver the budget to Congress, what we owe you is an explanation of how we believe this strikes the right balance so that, in fact, we are not shorting capability or readiness in exchange for capacity.
It's hard to believe that if your statement about our lines crossing, about China's technological acceleration approaching or exceeding ours, is indeed true. It doesn't seem that we're going to be able to protect the United States of America if Russia and China are catching up as quickly as they are.
Yes, sir. Let me just, as I said, our lines are crossing in certain areas, and I think these areas folks are well familiar with. We can talk about the DF-21D, which frankly caught us by surprise, and other areas where China and Russia have invested. They're targeting specific, what they consider to be vulnerabilities in terms of the United States Navy or the United States military, and we have either fallen behind or are playing catch up there. Today in our budget, we look across our weapon systems in terms of what we're developing, investing in for future capabilities, as well as the capacity that we will need, because we do not believe that it's a choice, that it's one or the other. We believe we need both, and we're trying to deliver both within the constraints of the budget that we have.
Great thing.
Sir, I would say is in terms of the vectors and crossing, there are some areas where some may have crossed and we come back. The ballistic missile defense. We've certainly made a lot of efforts at a highly classified to be able to work on that. One thing, what can Congress do? Lift the Budget Control Act, without a doubt. I mean, I go back again to the PB-12 levels, what we had, would a very much a different world we'd be in right now. When you come down, but how much about R&D? There is no Florida R&D or no limit to it. However, as we develop our science and technology budget, that is one area that's protected to be that it must be the same as inflation or greater. So we've always had a 2% growth, independent of all my other projects going down. The baseline we call budget activity 1 through 3 has always gone up to match inflation. We've never lost an erosion on that. That's coordinated through OMB and all the services. So we maintain a minimum. That's certainly not where we want to have it. But we have laid out for our Chief of Naval Operations the vectors of the Russian and Chinese submarine forces, missile systems, other items. Where can we bend our curve? And that's where we're starting to make some of these investments. To buy the SM-6 missile and the test the Secretary of Defense just announced last week, be able to make a weapon that goes at tremendous speed and range to launch off a large number of platforms, suddenly puts a large number of Chinese and Russian ships at greater risk from us, and the more modes we can create for that weapon. So the individual, to unleash the innovation of the American engineer and the American worker is where we really need to be. That's what restores some of that. But it comes down to being the resources. But Mr. Stackley's right. We are attempting to balance as we can. We have fully funded, have not cut any of the cyber teams. The Navy has to provide 40 cyber teams to the cyber commander and to the president. Those are all fully funded in this budget. We are developing all those tools. We wish we had more money. We're looking at our platforms, what we have to. So we do try to find balance. But what can Congress do is either your tremendous level of effort in 16 to lift what was essentially a BBA cut to restore us to what we asked for, despite what could have been less, was an effort. But we need that across the board to actually lift that act through 21. Otherwise, we'll be back every year again. There'll be a BBA for 18
The gentleman's
and 19.
time's expired, and since he thinks it's parochial, we'll try to get some people, maybe you weren't in the briefings when they said that the number one thing we could do to stop a conflict from going to 0-3 was a carrier strike group. That's why they think it's so important. And the number one we think they thought we could do to actually win that conflict was having a carrier strike group. So let's try to get those guys back over here to brief us again. But with that, the gentleman from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler, is recognized for 5 minutes. Sorry? Mr. Conaway, the chairman of Agriculture is recognized for 5 minutes.
I've got a kind of in the weeds kind of question, Secretary Stackley. In the 2016 NDAA, we put a restriction in place that prevented the Navy from buying bulk biofuels. It wasn't competitive with conventional fuel prices in the attempt to try to bring some rationality to a budget-constrained area rather than spending a lot of extra money on fuel that you can buy conventionally for less. Did you guys work with the USDA to have the USDA buy down the feedstock costs so that you could turn around and look like the Navy is buying the fuel at a much reduced price and to get around the NDAA?
Sir, I've not heard anything to that.
Okay. Would you take that one for the record?
Yes, sir.
Secretary Mavis and I have had a long-running gentleman's disagreement on algae-based jet fuel in particular, and I'm concerned that you guys may have tried to get around the NDAA, and I would be very disappointed if you did. I'm hopeful you'll get back to us and say, no, that didn't happen. We're in fully compliant with the NDAA, and we've not circumvented the spirit of that restriction.
So I'm going to make a statement exactly to that effect, because we would not do that. Now I'll go back and confirm it for you, but there's no way that the Department of the Navy would have circumvented the NDAA or created some mechanics with the Department of Agriculture to undercut the...
Well, the mechanics were already in place because that whole effort was a joint effort between Department of Defense and the Department of Agriculture to build that refinery and invest in it, and so I'm concerned that there'd be some games being played there. So if you'll check that, I'd appreciate it. Now you'll back.
The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Graham, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I represent NSA Panama City, and a lot of the countermeasures for mines are being developed there. I'm very proud to represent that part of Florida. I understand that there's a transition going on with our countermeasures for mines from older processes to the new LCS, off the LCS ships. What's the status of that? And I have a follow-up question.
Yes, ma'am. There absolutely is a change to the way we conduct mine warfare. First and foremost, we want to get the ships out of the minefield in terms of searching for, identifying, and neutralizing the mines. And that's how the LCS concept is structured. So rather than put the ship in the minefield, what the LCS carries is what's referred to as a Mine Countermeasures Mission Package, which is a series of systems that first locate a mine or a mine-like object, then verify that it's a mine, and then go out and neutralize the mine. It's one of the toughest things that we do, because if you imagine a large expanse of the ocean, that you're just looking for anything that might be a mine-like object, and then you have to verify it is before you go out and neutralize it without you entering the minefield. So we do that through use of unmanned vehicles. Today, what's referred to as the Mine Countermeasures Missions Package is going through testing. We spent virtually all of last year off of Panama City testing this package, and frankly, we met our requirements, where the requirement is how long will it take you to clear a minefield of a certain area as well as a channel of a certain length of mine-like objects. We met a requirement, but along the way of meeting the requirement, we also determined that the principal vehicle that we use for towing a sonar that spots the mines, that vehicle does not meet our requirements in terms of level of reliability. So we've put procurement of that vehicle on hold while we go out and look at other alternatives for the vehicle. But all the other elements of the mission package are working well. The sonar works well. We have what's referred to as an airborne laser mine detection system, which is virtually a laser detector that's carried on a helicopter. That's working well. The neutralization system is working well. But what's referred to as the remote multi-mission vehicle, it's unmanned, its reliability is unsatisfactory. So we're going to go ahead and make some modifications to the 10 of those that we have and have a mission package that is available for deployment. We are already deploying elements of the Mine Countermeasure Package today in theater as they prove effective. And then we're going to go off and look for a longer-term alternative solution for the vehicle that will tow the sonar.
So the plan that had been put in place to phase out the old process has been modified until we've developed a new process for the vehicle, the unmanned vehicle that will be using the countermeasures package? If I'm
Yes, ma'am. We expect we will have these mine countermeasure mission packages available for deployment on an LCS by 2019. This will be with the current vehicle. We want to get to an alternative. We think it's going to take an extra approximately 2 years to get to this alternative and complete its initial operational testing for its deployment.
Well, terrific. You answered all my questions. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And come back down to Panama City as frequently as you would like. It's wonderful down there. Thanks. Appreciate it. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Knight is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a couple questions. Start off with General Walsh, and let's talk a little bit about the transition that we're going through from Hornets to JSF. Where are we? How is it going? We went out to Quantico a couple days ago. We talked to some Marine aviators and talked to them about the Joint Strike Fighter. Can you give us an idea?
I think the program's going real well. I mean, the Marine Corps, we're on the front edge of the rest of the Department of Defense on this. And so VMFA 121 is our first IOC squadron that stood up this last year and has gone IOC. So we've got our first operational squadron. They're going to be ready to deploy here next year, to deploy in 17 to Iwakuni, Japan, and then be forward deployed on the USS Wasp. So they'll be really the first deployed fifth-generation capability in the Department of Defense that we've had. So very excited about that. The program, if you had a chance to talk to any of the air crew that were there and the maintainers, very excited about putting the airplane through a lot of tactics training, and it's doing phenomenally well. It's exactly what we thought it would be doing. Obviously, we've got delays between we made a decision to go from Prowler, Harriers, and Hornets to get to fifth generation and the F-35. I made that decision a long time ago. In the interim, we were on the front edge of this is the Marine Corps, and there's been some delays in the program, as there is in most programs where you work through this. but we're really confident of where we're at. Now, at the legacy side, back to the F-18s, is we're struggling with that piece because the airplanes are getting older, and if you've seen the readiness levels, I think about half the fleet right now is in a depot level maintenance. Thanks to the committee and Congress is helping us a lot with those readiness dollars to get the readiness up, to get that plug in there while we transition to the F-35. But I think we're very confident that we are on the right path by going to the F-35 and that fifth generation capability, not because of its stealth and precision capabilities. I think those are given. I think what people are going to really start to see in this aircraft, and we're seeing it in our exercises and operations that we've got right now, is for the Marine Air Ground Task Force, the ability to sense. The airplane is just a sensor, and it is able to take that information, sense it, bring it in, and now the ability to start sharing that around the battle force with the United States Navy, also the Joint Force, and certainly our Marines on the ground. That's the area that we have to continue to spiral up and get better at. Not only on the aircraft to be able to share that information down to Marines on the ground, but also to our ships. Certainly on the amphib ship side, we have not had that type of capability in our Harriers to be able to downlink, share that type of information off the aircraft like we have in the past. So I think the F-35 is going to bring tremendous capability. Now we have to leverage that capability throughout the battle force, both on the ground and with the ships.
Super, super. Thank you. Thank you, General. Admiral, and I know the chair is adamant about this, and I know most Congress is, but if the air wing was disbanded, what would happen to that air wing? Would we still have that air wing? Would we keep that as a ground force or as a relief force, or what would we do with that air wing?
Sir, if we retain the air wing, it would stay into this cycle. We would end up with gaps because air wings don't deploy to the ground. So we would not go to Japan or Guam with an air wing because it's contingent upon fighting on the aircraft carrier as a unified force. So what happens to the air wing is we are going to what's called deactivate. The squadrons the airplanes will move to other squadrons. The pilots and mechanics will go to other squadrons. The colors and the flags of the squadron will be basically put in the museum on hold in case we are going to go back and grow the Navy in the future. As we do another future force assessment, we would be able to reactivate the squadron. But not a single airplane will be taken out, and not a pilot or mechanic will leave the Navy. We will actually get the savings from is at this point in time, we don't have to bring as many people in to relieve them by the end of the fit-up. So that's the cycle where the savings come from. And there's a little bit in terms of operations. When I give, let's say he's the commander of the next squadron, I give him my airplanes, he needs a little bit of O&M dollars to keep them running, but not the same I had to keep the whole squadron running. So there is an operation savings and a manpower savings. But once again, that is merely, more in my mind, a cost avoidance. But the air wing itself would not have a place to go if we don't have an aircraft carrier for it, other than it flies at its home base.
Thank you, Admiral. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Langevin is recognized for 5 minutes.
Is this on? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your testimony today and your service to the country and for your willingness to speak with us today about the Navy's budget for FY15. I hadn't planned to ask this question, but to the chairman's question and to the last line of questioning on the air wing that would be retired, given the national security challenges that we face, aren't you taking a capacity out of the system in the event that we have to surge? I mean, doesn't that allow you to, for example, utilize that 10th Air Wing even if they're not deployed on a carrier, that if we need them, that allows the carriers to shift them there, to allow more sorties to be flown, et cetera, and not if you retire that 10th Air Wing, are you taking capacity out that doesn't therefore have that in reserve as a, should conflict break out?
Well, sir, it all comes back to me on the ergonometrics of an air wing in the Navy design, unlike an Air Force AEF. You would have, I guess, an absolute level. You'd be missing a few squadrons of airplanes, but you don't fight a group like that as from a land base. That's the difference between us and the Air Force is they come together as a group to be on the carrier, to be synchronized as a combat element. And so we don't really view this one as that, quote, hard choice. It really lays out, given that we need to get that air wing back. If we build the 12th aircraft carrier, then we need to go back to a 10th air wing. Our cycle is we need to be with a modern nuclear aircraft fleet, given the way they operate and design. The right number of air wings is 2 less, not 1 less, because we're no longer in that the carriers are designed to last 50 years, but we need to do that long-term maintenance on them. That freed up that point of having that air wing anymore. So it is not a whole air wing right now. In fact, because it has been shrunk over time, it was it's really 4 squadrons and an air wing commander. It was never a full air wing. And at this point in time, we don't think it's an artifact that we really need to keep. We think it's a good business decision to put those airplanes in the operational squadrons and line ourselves up to being 2 air wings less than the number of nuclear aircraft carriers we have.
Thank you, Admiral. I want to get to other questions I have, but so we heard yesterday morning from Admiral Harris before the full committee. The PACOM does not have a sufficient number of submarines to conduct the scale of operations that they'd like in the Indo-Asia Pacific region. And this is just one example highlighting our need for sophisticated undersea capabilities. How is the Navy leveraging cost-saving measures and supporting growth in key investment areas to achieve the desired force structure?
Let me start specifically with submarines. We spent a fair bit of time here discussing the submarine dilemma that we've got in terms of the number of submarines the combatant commanders demand, and then the challenges in terms of when Ohio replacement comes, can we or can we not sustain a 2 Virginia boat per year capacity? So I don't want to replay that or play that tape, but the other element that Admiral Malloy referred to earlier is adding the Virginia payload modules with the Block 5 submarines basically add another mission for the Virginia submarines. And it takes up their payload capacity from 12 up to 40 Tomahawks for strike capability. So one of the demand signals for Virginia under certain scenarios is, or for a submarine force under certain scenarios, is that strike mission. And so we're increasing capacity per boat in that regard. So we're struggling with, can we sustain 2 Virginias per year to mitigate the shortfall? Growing capability in terms of missile capacity in this particular case, as well as increasing the capacity of our weapon systems, the acoustic superior program that we have that we're introducing into Block 5 to make that force as capable and effective as possible. So it's both a capacity issue as well as grow the capability issue. Overall, though, we described the 308 ship force, and I will tell you that by way of driving stability into our shipbuilding program and designing for affordability where we can, I think we've done a great job in terms of delivering on, frankly, the promise of getting to that 308 ship Navy. What we have to do is sustain that focus and that effort across all of our programs.
Thank you, Secretary. I've long been an advocate of directed energy weapon systems, and I'm glad that the technologies are beginning to transition out of the lab into operational units, such as the 30-kilowatt laser on the USS Ponce. Moving forward, how can we best couple our naval platforms with our strategic weapon systems when it comes to areas such as directed energy or cyber?
And I'm going to ask you if you can take that for the record and submit it, because we've only got a few minutes before our votes, and Mr. Hunter is recognized for 5 minutes because the gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and they close those votes down quick now. We've become prompt. First question, you brought this up in the beginning about the Mediterranean. Is it a strategic decision to not have amphibs in the Med right now?
Sir, it comes back to what's called global force management, and so there are amphibs in the Mediterranean partially when they're transiting, but also when need to be repositioned based upon world activities. It does come down to being you have the number of forces you have, and everyone wants them. So right now it comes down to being, yes, sir, a strategic decision at a national level to where we put our forces that we have forward.
Is there a threshold in Europe and Northern Africa on what would have to happen to have a permanent rotation in the Med again?
I don't know of what I call as a threshold. I mean, it comes back again as the forces we have go where we need to be. We have been clearly used our amphibs to operate as necessary off Libya on a number of occasions, and other ships, whether it's on a national mission with grabbing the terrorist in Libya or other events that happened over there. But no, I don't know of any one threshold to say I have to be stationed there. That's really, imagine came up with General Breedlove talking to your committee earlier about how does he view the world in Europe, and then also the AFRICOM commander when he comes.
General, do you have any comments on that?
Congressman, I think, as you look at that situation, it's in that global force management. So as it goes into that GFM system, we've got an ARG that...
I've been hearing that a whole bunch. I'm sure it's a great analytical program, that determines where ships should be, right? That's what it is?
So I guess what I could look at right now is because of the number of amphib ships we have right now is they get deployed as an ARG, as you're aware, ARGMU that gets deployed to CENTCOM. CENTCOM right now gets the highest vote. They get the ships. As Admiral Malloy said, there's times in there based on the situation, they will chop over one of those ships, could be more, as the situation directs. What we're looking at right now, though, is because of that, the situation in the Med is whether we should be doing that more on a full-scale permanent basis. Right? You know, as before, we had always kept the ARG together. Now we're doing split and disaggregated operations where they deploy together, and now we split them up. We're now looking at, should we even look inside the GFM process on whether we should split them before they even deploy, because we don't have the number of ships to put in the Med.
Okay, thank you. Second question. I chair the Coast Guard Subcommittee, so we do all the Coast Guard acquisition, OPCs, FRCs, NSCs. We're trying to get the Secretary Stackley, we're trying to give the Coast Guard the same ability that the Navy has: advanced procurement, block buys, multi-year procurement, and lead time materials, just like the Navy does. Ronald Works testified on this. GAO just did some stuff where they said they could save a lot of money, like $1 billion over the life of any of their programs. Do you see any complications with giving the Coast Guard the same? I mean, you're all building ships, and in the end, you're building ships. So that's my question. Do you see any problems with that?
Absolutely not. I think that's a great tool that we've been able to use to generate savings, and the savings we use go back in the shipbuilding program so we can get more of what we need. The key is to have stability in terms of requirements and design before you make those long-term commitments in terms of block buys.
Inherently, what is OMB's, if OMB were to have an issue with doing multi-year procurement and block buys, what would it be? Besides they get locked in.
That's it. Yes, sir. Well, there's two things. One, have stability so that you know that if you make significant changes in the middle of a block buy or multi-year, then it's going to be disruptive and it's going to eat up the savings that you're going after. From a comptroller perspective, making that long-term commitment in the budget takes away flexibility. So if there are other requirements that emerge, you don't have as much flexibility in the budget to address the new requirements.
Roger. Okay, and my last question is about a thing called ATRT, Automatic Test and Retest. You talked about, Mr. Moulton talked about this a little bit, but there's a lot of money spent on integration and testing. Aegis is an example. I've got a quote from Secretary Kendall calling the ATRT program unprecedented success for SBIR technology, record ATRT's savings of cost and time to the Navy. I've got a thing here where it says an Aegis test, 80 hours, 9 analysts to do it manual. ATRT does it in 7 hours with 1 analyst. So all of these great glowing things about ATRT, and then I'm looking at the President's budget. ATRT had, let me see, $7 million in 15, 23 million, 16 now, 0 for 17. And the name has changed to ATA. Usually that portends bad things for a program, like it's going to be dumped off to a large corporation type contractor that's not an SBIR firm and not the inventor of this. You have any comments on this? Just
well, first, I'm a strong fan of ATRT. I'm the one who brought it into the Navy programs, and so it's always what we want is ATRT not to be something separate and different. We want all of our programs to be incorporating ATRT just like they do open systems. Sure. You don't see a budget line item for open systems. We make that a part of the standard by which we design.
But it's zeroed though. Why would it be zeroed out then for this budget, for the 17 budget?
Well, we actually have a continuation of the ATRT efforts. So I'll find the budget line item where we're doing it. I literally just met with the organization about 3 months ago going over this before we submitted the budget. What we have done is we have taxed programs to fund the effort as opposed to a separate budget line item. We want the programs vested in the effort. We want them to be directly involved in identifying where the efforts go to provide the biggest.
Mandated to be in the effort too, I would say, right? For different programs.
We directed it, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I told you all you'd have time to put something on the record. Unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left, so rather than make you wait an hour and come back, if it's okay, I'm going to let you put any comments that you want in the record that might elaborate or clarify any statements you've made, if that's agreeable with each of you. And with that, let me just thank you so much for your being here and for your service to our country. And with that, we're adjourned.